Welcome to Trash Compactor. I'm Josh, and one of the things that's special about Star Wars is the way it inspires others to create and add to the universe, be it making artwork or writing fan fiction. And today we're going to be discussing a very specific form of inspired art, that of the fan film. For those not familiar, Wikipedia has a pretty comprehensive definition of what a fan film is. A fan film is a film or video inspired by a film, TV program, comic, book, or video game created by fans rather than by the source's copyright holders or creators. Fan filmmakers have traditionally been amateurs, but some of the more notable films have actually been produced by professional filmmakers as film school class projects or as demonstration reels. Fan films vary tremendously in quality as well as in length, from short faux teaser trailers for non existent motion pictures to full length motion pictures. End quote. Fan films have been with Star Wars since pretty much the beginning, with the infamous Hardware Wars, a parody film that came out in 1978. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, right around the time that technology allowed George Lucas to make his prequel films, that very same technology fueled an explosion of fan filmmaking. And it's this period that we're going to be dealing with today. And joining me to partake in that discussion is the person who ran the Force.net fan films during the initial explosion of fan filmmaking from 2000 to 2005 ish. Is that correct, Jeff?
That is correct.
So this was before YouTube, before it was so easy to get a video on the internet. So it's not like you could just make a video and put it up for all the world to see. And the Force.net fan film served as a platform to get films seen by people. So I'm very pleased to welcome Jeff, who ran the Force.net fan films, to Trash Compactor. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So first off, was there anything that I just said that was inaccurate or that you would like to set straight about that period of fan filmmaking?
Yeah, so you're absolutely correct. Hardware Wars was the grandfather of all the fan films, and it really was. I think 97 when Troops. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here, but that was really the resurgence of fan films, and really got a lot of people involved, especially in the Southern California area. And I think really led to the research, that time period being so special for so many Star Wars fans.
No, absolutely. And for those unfamiliar, Troops was a Star Wars mashup with the show Cops, with like a dash of Fargo, I want to say, given the accents of the troopers. But it was following a couple of stormtroopers around, and they investigate a domestic dispute, and it's between Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. And it was just a really well done, very funny parody fan film that, yeah, I think you're right. I think that that's sort of the, if Hardware Wars is the granddaddy of Star Wars fan films, it's certainly like the godfather of that second wave of fan filmmaking in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, and that's really what got me back into it. I was in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert, and I'm now reading about people doing Star Wars films, and they're from Southern California. And, that's where I grew up at, and they're doing all this, making cops parody, Troops, and so that's really it inspired me to, and for a couple years before I got out, and then once I got out, I'm like, hey, I want to be involved with that somehow. But the joke is that everybody in Southern California is an actor or director or something like that. And it just so happened I did have a lot of friends that were involved with Hollywood in some way. With my first job that got out when after I got out of the military, so it was pretty easy for me to slide into that role and just get involved with the fan film community. The fledgling obviously was fledgling at that time, but just get involved and then try to. Initially, I wanted to do a film, and then I found out how hard it is, and how, especially with and it wasn't so much the filming and all, the story writing, all that stuff. Yeah, that's its own art that honestly I'm not very good at. But I was able to put something together, but it was the permits, because at this point, the city of Los Angeles, Los Angeles County, stuff like that, really didn't know what we were. So we couldn't really get away with filming in the city. I kind of lied and said I was from USC, at the film school, so they didn't charge me on a permit. So I was able to film in Griffith Park for a day,
Oh, wow.
and that. Yeah, and but after that, and a lot of fan films, they film out in the desert. That's where Kevin Rubio, who did Troops, they just film out in the desert, so you don't have to worry about that. But it was just, I just got into that, and I'm like, I really don't like having to deal with this, and all this headache. So that's when I kind of turned my sights to actually promoting fan films, and I'm like, somebody should report the news because people are going to be interested in this. Um, and so theforce.net was my inspiration, just that style, the way they did the reporting on the news and all that kind of stuff. um, you know they're the whole big, that was the time of the fan site wars were going on. So it was, everything's hot and heavy, everything's, everybody's trying to beat each other out. But so I created what's called, it was fanfilms.com in mid 99. um, and I happened to be working for an internet company at the time, so I did that at night. I ran the website during the day, while I was also coaching football. And but with my connections at my internet company, there were so many guys that were former filmmakers or current filmmakers and special effects guys, and they were able to get me connections to people, or even a couple of them actually did their own films that eventually got mentioned on TFN or was hosted. But it I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and just made the right connections for fanfilms.com. Then that was pre theforce.net, and that's really what led in to me joining theforce.net, about because fanfilms.com only lasted about 6 months before it
Mm.
got swallowed by theforce.net. And I mean, I brought it in. And so I don't know if you remember, at that time it was called TFN Theater. So when I came in, I rebranded it as TFN Fan Films. And I brought fanfilms.com, so it would redirect to the TFN Fan Films part of the force.net. And we set to just kind of rebuild the entire section and to make it a lot bigger, because right at that point it was pretty much just hosting troops. And but I wanted to, like, okay, we're going to have our own news section, which eventually, that made its way onto the main page. So a lot of the main fans started to realize that, hey, there are fan films here, and people are doing stuff that are maybe interesting to the fans besides just the movies. But yeah, so we completely rebranded that section of the site, and then we started adding tutorials on how to actually do a lot of the effects, and that actually led into a lot of interesting conversations with people, with professionals um, in the industry, and also personally for me, it led to, for jobs down the road. We can get into that later, but uh, just that decision to make a one section um, that provided guidance. And then of course, then we had the forums, which
Hmm.
amazing people were there. And you told me, and you were there. It's just amazing that the community we had there. We ignored, and this is something that I did on intentionally. We ignored all the outside noise. I didn't care about the fan site wars going on. I didn't care about who's getting exclusive information about the next episode. I didn't care. All I cared about was bringing the community together, of filmmakers to help each other. And I didn't care where you're going to be hosted. I just wanted to have everybody make the best fan film that they could on the budgets that they had. I mean, as you said, sometimes people had zero budget. Some people, had 20, 30, $40,000 to do it. And so it was just my goal. I just wanted to, this is where I enjoyed, and I wanted to watch these fan films. So I tried to make it an effort to have one community that could just ignore everything else and just be together and help each other and make great art.
No, that is one of the reasons why when I wanted to do an episode about fan films, the first thing I thought of was TFN fan films, and I reached out because obviously the force.net website is still around. I don't think it's inaccurate to say that the heyday of it was probably around this period that we're talking about.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah, like the community and the resources and sort of, at least for me, I was in high school, college at the time, and I was trying to make fan films myself. And I certainly used I availed myself of the tutorial section and really found it invaluable. And even though I never ended up completing a fan film, that was really a training ground where I learned a lot of the skills. I taught myself a lot of the skills through that kind of experimentation and trying to figure out how to get things done that are skills that I still utilize in my professional career to this day. Like it's just whether it's video editing or motion graphics. Really that approach to problem solving. Well, I want to achieve this. How do I get there? And sort
Hmm.
of that, whether it was like trying to add a lightsaber glow
Hmm.
to a broom handle or trying to render a computer generated spaceship or whatever it is, how to get the footage from the camera to the computer, then back out to tape, VHS at the time, like that community was really sort of my film school in a lot of ways, and I really learned so much. And yeah, so I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, first off, thank you for all of that work that you did back then to create that community. So you had tried to make a fan film at one point. You mentioned you shot a day in Griffith Park or something. What was your film going to be, and why did you stop?
So originally, the name of mine was Revenge of the Sith, and this
Really?
is not, yes,
Cool.
because I remember, because that's the original name of episode 6, Return of the Jedi,
Exactly.
or it
Exactly.
was
Revenge of
Revenge
the
of the
Jedi.
Jedi. Oh, so what it was actually going to be was about Darth Bane's ascendancy, and of course, I had to do like everybody else in the Force type thing, and it was two Jedi on each side, and
Yep.
at the what winds up happening is the Padawan actually kills the Sith Lord, and the Padawan takes the name of Darth Bane, and he's now turned. And so that was the ending of it. Was, so the whole conflict was going to be the movie, and I only filmed like half of it, the fights. But then at the end, it was going to be, he takes the name Darth Bane, and he's going to go off and take the Sith shuttle, and basically he'd be the Darth Bane of history. So yeah, it was. So the original name was Revenge of the Sith. I found out somebody had the name, and I was like, either I could either ask them to change their name, or I can just do it. And I was like, I'm just going to change it. And so I changed it to Lord of the Sith. And I did a really crappy trailer for it. I would never do that again, because I didn't have a lot of the experience of doing rotoscoping and all that kind of stuff. So I had to figure out a lot of the stuff on my own, which again that's what led to a lot of my tutorials, because I figured out how to do it. But I did it through Photoshop, and instead of doing it
Right.
through After Effects, I took
Yeah.
you
Same.
could do
Same. Yeah.
the film
Like you.
strip.
Uh-huh, yeah, you exported it as a film strip, and you
Hmm.
you literally went into Photoshop and you imported this huge, huge image file.
Yes.
It was every single frame was a separate image in one file, and you drew on the cells. I mean, in a
Yes.
way, it was like they did it back in the day,
Yes.
except it was not physical film. It was, a digital image, but it was still frame by frame, and that's not
Yes.
how they do it anymore.
Yeah. A couple years later, I learned, like, yeah, you can just do it in After Effects, and it's
Yeah.
really easy to do. Because I had to like draw the shadow of the shuttle, in which I did the shuttle in 3D Max or whatever. I had to draw the shadow in this film strip, and and I do the lightsabers and stuff like that, and they weren't the greatest. And I just saw that I'm not gonna. This is not fun, and I
Yeah.
wanted, and I'm gonna have to go back now, and I wanted to finish this film. I'd have to kind of lie to them again to say I'm a film student, not to charge me. And it was a lot of money too.
For like a permit? Oh, sure, for sure.
And there's not a lot of places in Los Angeles to film in the forest, unless you go up to like the national forest. But I mean, I'm not going to take people up there who are just doing this for free.
For sure.
So,
Yeah. Do you still have that footage anywhere, or has it
oh
been
no,
lost to the sense?
it's long
It's
gone.
long gone?
Yeah, because I had a dedicated SCSI drive again, because I also had to learn the technology, because
Yep.
I had the old what was it, 4,800 RPM or whatever, the slower.
Yeah, right, 4,800 RPM. Yeah, mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you had to get a 10,000
Oh, wow.
RPM
Yeah,
SCSI drive. So I
you're
had to,
bringing me back.
yeah. So my Mac G4, I had to build it up, and that's the hard drive was super expensive, because the
Yep.
SCSIs were much more impressive. So yeah, it just stayed in the J4, and then I got rid of that thing probably 10, 12 years ago. I should have kept it just for, but I still have a lot of the films in digital format hanging out on my server that I built.
Like, I think it's really important to place this in context because you look at YouTube, like YouTube, I feel like was really a game changer, and we can get into this a little later. But like some of the functions that TFN fan films really served at that time were a couple things. I mean, number one, it was like a curator, it was a platform, it was a place to go to see these films. And if you were a fan filmmaker, it was a place to go to try to get your film seen. Whereas, now, like, you would just probably upload it to YouTube, if not, one of a zillion other social networking platforms with videos.
Yeah.
But then also the tutorials. Today, if you want to figure out how to do something, like, you go to YouTube and you ask the question in the search field, and then you get a zillion tutorials.
Mhm.
And like that did not exist at the time that we're talking about. And like you guys were, I mean, at least for me, like the only game in town. And I think people who weren't around then, like it's probably hard to wrap your mind around digital video on the internet before YouTube.
Mhm. Hosting was actually one of the hardest things that we had to do. Hosting was a big part of the site. And when I opened it up, you're right. I mean, a lot of people wanted to get on the site, and which I wish I could host everybody. I would have if I could. If YouTube existed at that point, I would never have hosted anybody. I would have put everybody on YouTube and pointed them, and I would have created a site on TFN to go there. I would have done it for everybody. I mean, the worst thing I had to do was reject people. And I mean, I created a form letter because I was at the internet company. That's what I did. I responded to people via email for a lot of things, because I was writing, connection strings for modems, that kind of thing. That's how old I go back. But it's so I wrote these templates for my guys. I started it, and then we had John and Max came on. Um, and by the way, I'm still friends with them. I still have connections to them on the internet. We don't talk as much anymore, but we're still connected in our lives. I'm with Kevin, all those guys. I'm still uh, connected. That community was so tight that you know we shared something. I think that we just all are had such an interest in that it meant so much to us that we just don't let it go.
So
So
these people who you're talking about, were they part of TFN at large or the
no,
TFN
no,
fan film community
TM
specifically?
fan films. Yeah. So
Yeah,
John
got it.
John refers to he did Crazy Watto and the Jedi Hunter.
Oh, okay.
Uh, yeah, and he still does he does filmmaking. He does stuff for Babylon 5. He still does a lot of editing for TV news down in Tennessee. But I'm still in contact with him. Max, he just helped me on the site. He was just a geek and was willing to help me out and get everything. And now he's at the university in Virginia teaching digital media as a professor. So I mean, it's
Wow.
a lot of these guys have just kept into this. For me myself, as we'll now talk about the tutorials, because of those tutorials, they got mentioned in an article, and my company, down the road saw this and they said, "Hey, you know how to teach people on the internet?" I said, "Yeah." That I taught people how to make lightsabers and how to make the opening crawl in Star Wars. And it just so happened my director was a huge Star Wars fan and said, "Hey, we have a training department. We would like you to come into training for us." And so I went from, working Photoshop and After Effects and all that kind of stuff. And now here I'm now working Flash. In the military, I'd worked in a bunch of other macromedia things because my last unit was a training unit. But so now I'm going into Flash, and I'm going from doing customer support type items, and now I'm becoming a programmer, a Flash developer. I'd done some programming on TFN. I mean, I helped. Anthony was the main programmer on the site, and he did all this. He built all the sections for us, and handled the database work. But I helped him, and when on the TFN's part of things. So I could do HTML, JavaScript, the minor stuff. But now I'm actually going into hardcore coding, and Flash development, of course, took this is the early part of Flash development. So that was 10 years of a lot of work, and it's just continued on today. And I'm still a developer. So it's those kind of things, those relationships that I had that I got from TFN's the fan films. is what really has led to a lot of success today. Even to, when I left California and, I did it, because of TFN fan films. We went to the convention out here, Indianapolis, and we loved it out here so much. I lost my job at the internet company, and I'm like, we liked Indianapolis, let's move there, and so I did that.
Wow.
And then I met Lisa Fett. I don't know if you remember that, because I got married while I was on the website, and people said, congratulations with because my forum name was Azeem. It was Azeem and Lisa
Azim.
Fett, yeah, and there's a picture of a royal guard and Boba Fett getting married. And I've told you the story that I met her through the 501st, and
Right.
but I met her because of I met another costuming group while I was out at Dragon Con for TFN, and I wanted to try a different convention, so I went to Dragon Con as TFN, covered it for that, and then I met a group of people there, and they said, "Hey, we have a friend in Southern California who's part of the 501st. You should meet her." And so I met her, and then I married her, and we just celebrated our 21st anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So everything in my adult life has come from that. Come from joining the Force.net, and work with the 501st. So it's, the relationships have just continued on to this day. And even there's more, fan filmmakers I'm still friends with as well. The anonymous director, Sandy, who did the Batman versus Predator, the guys who did Night Quest.
Night
So
Quest, yeah. No, yeah,
mhm.
that's one of the ones. I have a list of ones that I still remember fondly from those days, and Night Quest was, I remember a lot of hype for that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually went on to the set during some of their reshoots, and I was there when they were filming. And then I met Joe. I mean, because he was a video editor, special effects artist type guy. I
Joe
went to
Monroe,
actually,
was that his name?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I went to, yeah, he actually worked for Universal at the time, so I went to his office in Universal and got to see the real deal. So a lot of those guys became my real friends, and and I said we've just stayed in contact, and it's interesting to see like where everybody has gone since those days.
No, that's so cool. I'm so glad to hear that you and some of the other members of the community, this really led to a lot of things in their
Oh yeah.
adult life and careers and lasting friendships. I mean, that's so lovely to hear that. Um, you mentioned a couple things, like just for the benefit of any of our listeners who don't know about the 501st, could you just briefly explain what the 501st is and then how that lent itself to the work that you did in the fan film community?
Yeah, so in I think it was 1997, Alvin Johnson and one of his buddies, Alvin Johnson is the founder of the 501st, and they went down to Dragon Con, and they started stormtroopers, and they're like, then he got home and he's like, this is back in the GeoCity days, and he created a
Right.
web. And at that
City.
point, it was just like the squad. It was like the 501st squad, or actually, it was like the attachment block for some weird number. I can't remember what it was. That didn't last long because now people started joining him, and so it became the 501st Legion. 501st, obviously, kind of named after the like the 501st, like the paratroopers from World War II. It sounded military, and of course Legion, because Legion of my best troops. From Return of the Jedi,
Right.
and so
Right.
that kind of got incorporated into the history of us. That was our Legion on Endor, and so we became Vader's fists. And so that was pretty cool, and there was it's kind of they were kind of like paralleling us on the fan film side of it. And then I can't remember which book it was. In one of the books, the 501st got canonized, and then in episode 3, of course, the blue clone troopers became the 501st clone trooper detachment, and they're the ones that actually
Right.
march with Anakin into the Jedi Temple. Thanks, yeah, congratulations, you're the guys that killed a bunch of kids.
A
But
bunch of kids,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but anyways, but we,
Uh,
we we got canonized. And so what was happening with fan films is it grew in popularity. The dressing up as stormtroopers started growing more popularity, and also Vader. Now we had Vader's, Boba Fett's, and these were very high quality costumes. So I was working with Albin at the time early on when we were trying to reorganize the Legion, get everybody in, to say, okay, if you're like these certain states, you're a garrison, different garrisons and that kind of stuff, so they can get in contact. Well, it just now I have everybody's contact information. So when people were emailing us saying, "Hey, I'm making a fan film in North Carolina, who do I call?" If I'm making a fan film in Northern California, who do I call? And I would actually reach out to these guys in the 501st to help them get in touch with these fan filmmakers. And a lot of these guys, that's how a lot of these guys showed up in the films.
Yeah, that's so great. And what's so funny is that like that tradition has even continued to this day with like even, official Lucasfilm productions. Like if I'm not mistaken, on The Mandalorian, they needed a bunch of stormtroopers, and I
Mhm.
believe the 501st showed up to be on screen in an episode of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, the end episodes, I think episode 11 and 12, I think that's what it was. The one where
Yeah,
they attacked the town, and Moff Gideon, kills his own men, and
right.
they're
Yeah. So you were the originator of that sort of resource or tradition. It's so ingrained in the Star Wars community, and that the real guys even go to them.
And one of the things I actually got to attend is everybody knows about the Chinese theater. Well, you can call Grauman's, Mann's, whatever you want to call it. It's the Chinese theater. That is like
Mhm.
that is the home of the blockbuster. That's where the term comes from. That's where Star Wars originated from. And because if you're out of the Chinese theater, if everybody's trying to get in, the line goes around the block. And
Right.
so when Episode 1 came out, and I wanted to go see that the day one, we actually had to wait in line to get tickets, and we did that around the block. So for Episode 2 came out, I got an email from Lucasfilm, and they reached out to me because of my connections with the Force.net, as well as with the 501st, and said, "Hey, we need a bunch of stormtroopers and characters at the Chinese theater for the red carpet premiere for Episode 2." So I got to organize a bunch of guys and gal, my wife, in costumes, and we were actually at the Chinese theater when Sam Jackson, Ewan McGregor, and a bunch, Ahmed Best, all showed up for the Episode 2 premiere. That was of course broadcast, nationwide, and there we are in the background. And our Darth Vader, which one of the coolest things is, because Ewan McGregor's, Obi-Wan has not met Darth Vader yet. Our Darth Vader was 6'6" or 7", something like that. He was a really tall guy. So he looks like Darth Vader because he's that tall. And the funny thing is he was actually a part-time writer for Star Trek. But I think
That's
I
really
don't,
funny.
yeah, I think it was Voyager or something like that. I can't remember which series he was doing. But so he's doing this, and so this is like the first time Ewan McGregor is seen with Darth Vader that I know of. And so he's at, obviously he's in his street clothes, and Ewan McGregor's in his street clothes, but there's pictures of him and 6'6", 6'7" Darth Vader in full uniform. And I thought that
That
was
was
kind
the
of cool.
first. No, no,
First
that's awesome. So that was the first time you and McGregor had come face to face with a full suited, kitted out Darth
that I know
Vader,
of.
it
Yeah.
seems
Yeah.
like. That's
So
so interesting. So, obviously he starred in the recent Obi-Wan Kenobi show on
mhm.
Disney Plus, and you have to imagine that when he goes on set and he sees Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, that like that memory sort of flashes in his head, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, and he's now known as, I mean, he's the character and but it's interesting, and it's kind of fun to see the history of it from, a view that not everybody got to see.
That's so
Because
cool. That's really
yeah,
cool.
and which was just funny, that's because like the fire marshals for that event is coming up to us and talking to us and Lucasfilm personnel, and they're saying like, because it was 90 something degrees, and that's really hot in those outfits. I was the Royal Guard then, of course, and Lisa Fett was, of course, Boba Fett. And they're telling us, you guys have got to take, breaks every like 15-20 minutes. So we would sneak off behind like, some area, and get a quick drink, get our helmets off really quick, and then for 5 minutes, and then come back out, and and just stand there. And Vader, of course, would meet all the guests and stuff like that. Vader just being Vader. um so it's just one of those things where, I think Lucasfilm, having a garrison in California, and now there's like three of them. Or there at the time there was two of us, and then Central California was a squad, if I remember right. And now there's at least three or four So California has always been a major hub for the 501st, but it's, for when they needed stormtroopers, whether for Mandalorian or for a premiere, they could count on, they can call on the 501st and they'll be there.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. So before I go any further, I have a confession to make.
Okay.
So I am actually the original owner of the domain fanfilm.com singular. Because I was trying to make a Star Wars fan film around 1999 like everyone else, and I had a vision to make a site that is basically what TFN fan films became. And
Uh-huh.
you obviously got there first, but I always wondered if the person who registered fanfilms.com had tried to get fanfilm.com.
I did not.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yep.
It actually kind of bums me out because I accidentally let the domain lapse when I was in college, and now it's in the hands of some domain squatter who wants like 20 grand for it or something. And it's just like, it just makes
Yeah.
me so mad every time I think about it. But anyway,
Yeah.
I
When
digress.
I left TFN, I gifted them the website, the domain. I
Oh,
had
very
nothing.
nice.
Yeah, I was not going to use it, and I didn't want exactly what you said. I didn't want some domain squatter to grab it, so I signed it over to them and let them have it. Whether they, I don't, I haven't, I've never checked to see if they still have it even today, but um, I always wanted it to be so people can find fan films. I didn't care if I was there or not.
No, absolutely. Well, you've eased my conscience after like 20 something years because I always felt really badly. I assumed that the owner of fanfilms.com had also wanted fanfilm.com and saw that it was already registered. And I felt really badly that I never did anything with it. So, but
Mhm.
you have, I can now
Yeah.
sleep at ease without any guilt.
Yep.
um, so, again, one of the things that you mentioned really briefly, because hosting was such an important function of the site, like just out of necessity, like, I mean, like you said, there wasn't a YouTube, there was no way, no like universal way or no simple way to host digital video on the
Hmm.
internet. So uh, 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 you're having to take things into account like bandwidth issues. And I remember, what was that software, that encoding software, like it was such a challenge to get the file size of the videos small enough, that like sweet spot of quality to
Hmm.
file size. And I remember, these were the days when like you'd have like a QuickTime file and everything would appear in like three versions: the high
Yep.
quality download, the medium quality download, and the low quality download for those on like dial up.
Yeah.
And you were saying that like you had to be choosy with the fan films that you would select to put on TFN fan films, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
then it was bandwidth and obviously space.
right.
Nowadays, people, oh, gigabytes and, terabytes,
No, 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 no.
it's no big deal. Yeah, we're
No.
in megabytes.
Yeah.
And but actually, I think bandwidth was probably the biggest kicker for us. So one of the things you're talking about, I don't remember. It was quick because I used QuickTime Pro was one of the programs I
Like
used at the
Sorensen
time.
Squeeze,
Yeah,
I think it was
Sorensen
called, like, yeah.
Sorensen was the big one, and QuickTime Pro were the two main ones that we had. What was funny is I actually got an email from an Apple developer of QuickTime, and he sat down with me and told me, here's all the settings that you want to use at the to get these sizes, these bit rates, which bit rates is obviously the how the quality of the image, to
Right.
keep it from pixelating and that kind of stuff. But he actually gave me all this information that Apple had, and so I was able to use that information and make a lot better films at lot small, the smallest possible size that I could. So, I mean, it was a challenge just sometimes uploading these things. Um, I screwed up
That's
one time and I missed a deadline. And I was, because I actually I would do it at work. They never caught me, but sorry, folks who I worked for at the time. But that's how I did. I did it at work because we had like multiple T3 lines. At that time was that's the way to get to the internet.
mhm.
With the maximum speed, but I couldn't even get into some of these servers because I missed that because I was late getting to work, and people were already trying to download, and they were
Wow.
hitting the site and they hit it so much, and they were downloading. I don't know if people were downloading other films or what they were doing, but they were trying to get to the site so much that it locked me out. Eventually, I had to like kick to block the site, and to keep them from hitting a site that's pulling bandwidth from my servers, and then I would upload, and then I would re-engage the site. I only made that mistake once, and then after
Wow.
that, I made sure I would always tell people I'm going to do it this day, and then I would upload like the day before.
Wow. That's wild.
So let me tell you the story about bandwidth. And so this is the famous story that all people from the website and one of the directors knows. So towards the end, I think it was Sins of the Jedi. Do you remember that one? It was These are the guys made on
Yes.
the East Coast, pretty well made film. Guys were super nice to us and stuff like that, and it was hyped up for many years. Well, during my tenure, TFN kind of partnered with IGN. So we're talking about a major, you know, servers. And so we're on their servers, on the IGN servers. And I had uploaded, and I think this was around the episode 3 convention here in Indianapolis. And I uploaded Sins of the Jedi. Well, during the middle of the convention, the owner of TFN says he just got off a call with IGN screaming at us because we just took down their entire servers because so many people, the bandwidth is so high for Sins of the Jedi that we can't host it anymore. And we actually had to take it down because IGN was screaming at us for,
That
for
is
taking all the
incredible.
bandwidth. Yeah.
That is incredible. That's so wild.
That was probably my last major film. I wasn't really happy about it. I understood, but then I had to call the guys up. I'm like, hey, we're taking it down because you know it's too popular. And they were super nice. They understood. I think they got their own hoster and they figured out their own way of doing it. I tried to like redirect to them and everything like that, but that was probably the biggest bummer, and kind of one of the things that solidified my decision that it was time to go, because things were changing at that time period, and we'll talk about that more later on. But it was just one of those things that said, episode 3, I'm done. Just too much is changing, and I didn't like where fan films were going at the time at that time, and I didn't feel it anymore.
Well, that's interesting. So,
Um,
bandwidth, it was a finite resource, so you had to be choosy. And that was one of the good things about TFN Fan Films was that you guys really acted as kind of a curator. It was a destination to go to see the stuff that was being made, sort of the cream of the crop. And I was just wondering, what were your criteria for what you would look for in a fan film? Like, what would make you say yes to one film and no to another film? Stuff like that.
so obviously early on it was, we didn't have a lot of diversity there. So really, if it was a half decent film, that it didn't look like you were filmed out in your backyard, um,
Mm,
and with your home camera, that you didn't know how to do color correction. The audio didn't echo like crazy. J- you know, s- so we were pretty generous at the beginning, just because I wanted get films on the site. I don't think I ever put anything on that I didn't like. There's some of the ones that were not my favorites, but I still liked them. I liked the artistry of it. I liked what they were trying to do, and then so my thoughts of, okay, this is going to be a sprawling Star Wars saga. Obviously, Night Quest was one of the earlier ones. It took a little bit longer to get done, but I was like, let's step back from that, and I want something to see. I want to see people do things new,
mm.
or something I want to see them do something specifically good, like I don't know if they were brothers or cousins or whatever. Remember the two Chinese guys, they fought with plastic sabers. They rotoscoped them and stuff like that, but they knew how to fight from kung fu, and they did it was the one where the guy's quoting a Civil War letter. It was really different. Do you remember that one? And they would fight. They even fought dual sabered.
The Art of the Saber talking
Yes,
about.
Art of the Saber.
Yes.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, then Art
Right.
of the
Art of the
Saber, but
Saber.
it was two guys, and they weren't dressed up as really a Sith or Jedi at all. But they just fought. They were really fast, and obviously their weapons were pretty light. But they knew how to do do choreography, and they did it on a simple level. So that I picked that one because I liked that they were trying to do something different. I thought the letter was just really, I thought it was odd and weird, but I thought it was pretty cool. It was just the way they incorporated that into the movie, their little movie. But the guys could choreograph a fight, much
Right.
like the guys, Duality obviously did it on a much grander scale. You know, Dave McCumber has gone on to do great things. He's like a well-known coordinator, and like he does directing now as well. But he's like big time. He does big time A-list movies. So he that was his huge stepping stone. But so they did something like Duality, but on a much smaller scale with just two guys in the woods, with a pretty crappy camera. But they were able to achieve it, and it looked natural. Um,
Mm,
and and there really only been a few like lightsaber fights that I've thought were as good as that. Um,
mm.
Ryan's fight was fantastic. He did a series of them, was
Yeah,
fantastic.
Ryan versus Dorkman.
Yeah, Dorkman's
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, those guys, they were fantastic, and they knew what they. So that was the kind of thing where they did one thing and it was good. Um, like PA Wars, those guys
Yeah.
I'm still friends with. It was just so bizarre and just so weird that I had to put it on the screen because it's just because they knew how to write and they knew how to do comedy, something you just never saw, you just didn't see in Star Wars. So it was just something different. Um, and I even quote that movie a few times every few years, just because I can remember the lines from it. So that's what I was looking for, especially down over the next few years as more films came in, and then we started getting into the crossovers, and
Mm,
I had to be really careful with those at first, because I'm going to tell you honest, I was expecting us to get shut down at some point. Um,
really?
yeah, I thought Lucasfilm was eventually because remember Paramount was really against this, and they still are.
Yeah, they
Um,
still are. Yeah. Yeah, there is a big difference. I think it's actually pretty striking in the approach. I mean, this is something that I was going to ask a bit later on, but it seems like, especially at this time, Lucasfilm was very friendly to the fan film community. I mean, within reason, obviously. I mean, like if
mhm,
somebody was trying to make money off of a fan
yeah,
film, they probably wouldn't have been okay with that. But it was, really in stark contrast to say the way Paramount handled fan activities around Star Trek.
mhm,
I remember way back in the day, I don't know if it was around this time or even earlier, but they for a while they didn't even allow the use of images on fan sites,
yeah, I remember that.
which
Yeah,
is like,
so
very, very strict.
yeah, so then I wish I could remember the name of the film. Then we got a crossover with Star Wars and The Matrix. And
Yes.
that one, at first I was kind of nervous about putting up, but I was like, I got to do it. I mean, because Matrix was really popular at the time, but I got to put it up. And because they did a very good job on the Star Wars side of it. And it was like one of the first times that this started coming out. So that is where the whole, hey, now we're going to start looking at non-Star Wars fan films. I didn't ask anybody if I could do this. I just did it. um and of course, the infamous Batman versus the Predator was a
Hmm.
huge film. And they sent us a copy, they digitized it for us. And I'll tell you, a lot of the fan filmmakers, they couldn't digitize. They sent me the films, and I
Hmm.
digitized it for them. And we'll talk about that in a second, because that actually led into one of the famous incidents with fan films. And but yeah, so Batman versus Predator, that was like, at this point, I was like, I don't care. I'm just gonna, fan films is a lot more than Star Wars. TFN fan films can't get locked. I didn't want to get locked into just Star Wars at this point. Because this is like 04, 05. I could see that if we just lock ourselves into Star Wars fan films, we're gonna get, people are gonna get tired of it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
like, how many lightsaber fights in the woods can you have? I mean,
yes,
I mean to be reductive about it, but
yeah, and people, we had basically one guy that could do the Darth Vader voice, Ben, down in Australia. Everybody was talking to him. Um, and again, he was like one of those resources where people would ask me, like, how do I get in touch with, so and so's fan film used Darth Vader, and he sounds, pretty close to James Earl Jones. How do I get in touch with that guy? And I was like, here, look, here's his email address. Go talk to him. Um, but I knew it. So once we started to that, I was even no more so. I was expecting, like, we're going to get a cease and desist at some point. And funny enough, Warner Brothers didn't care. And whoever owned, Warner Brothers owns Batman. I don't remember who owns Predator at the time. It may have been them as well. They
I
didn't
think
care.
Fox, right?
Yeah, yeah. So luckily those that group did not involve anybody who really either followed us and didn't know about it. I think eventually they found out about it. I mean, Batman versus Predator just became too big, but it never happened. Um, so I thought we were pretty fortunate on that because I didn't know what would happen if it really did happen. We got a takedown letter because we did not have the relationship with these other in studios that TFN did with Lucasfilm. I mean, we had people that used to work for TFN that worked at Lucasfilm, and so they could email us on the side on say, hey, you guys got to take that down, that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, one of my questions was what, if any, contact you guys had with Lucasfilm, and were there ever any conversations or like, okay, like here's where the line is. Like as long as you stay away from this or you don't go here, then we're fine. But it sounds like you guys had a pretty close relationship.
We did. Steve Sansweet was the director of fan relations. Super nice guy. My first introduction to him wasn't all that great though. And so let me tell you about that infamous San Diego Comic-Con. Had two different things happen to me. So my introduction to Steve Sansweet was I was covering the conventions. Since I lived in near Los Angeles, I can get down there, and we went down there anyways. So I covered the convention. I didn't know TFN, I was kind of separate from the guys who did the spoilers and that kind of stuff. I didn't know that TFN had just posted a major spoiler that day. So so I was covering the episode 2 panel. It was Steve Sansweet. Some guy gets in the questionnaire and goes, by the way, hey, Steve, on TFN today, they posted that Anakin gets his arm cut off. And
Oh, wow.
so I wasn't paying attention, and I was just covering and stuff like that. I didn't listen to the Q&A because, I was figuring it's just going to be, Coke or Pepsi. What
Right,
did you eat
exactly.
today? So I wasn't paying attention to that. After the convention, I went up to Steve or the panel, and I was like, "Hey, Steve, I'm Jeff with TFN Fan Films. I work with theforce.net. I just want to talk to you. If we can get an interview with this." And Steve got really mad at me, and he's like, "You guys posted that, and I can't do an interview with you because you guys just gave a major spoiler plot away right here, right before the convention, before the movie came out." And I was like, "Oh boy!" And then later on, he gave me a call and he's like, hey, it's not, I know it wasn't you. I'm sorry, and blah, blah, blah. And so, but him and I had contact, and he's one that actually contacted me for about doing that, the premiere for
Oh,
episode
wow.
2. So that's how that
Yeah.
came on. At that same convention, you remember the Anonymous Director episode 2 fan trailer?
Yes.
Do you remember that incident where somebody at Lucasfilm said, hey, this looks like the trailer for episode 2? So what had happened? There was a screening at that Comic-Con. So
Okay,
what
there
had
was a screening where they screened the anonymous director's fan trailer for episode 2.
Yes. And
Okay.
nobody had any context for it. Because remember, what used to usually happen on the TFN movies at the bottom right would say theforce.net.
Right.
I found out why we do that and found out. So what had happened is I was leaving for San Diego Comic-Con and I was running out of time. And this at that time, Sorensen and QuickTime Pro took forever to
Took a long
encode.
time, yeah, to encode
I
for
didn't have
sure.
enough time, so I did the small version only before I went out the door. But I forgot to put
The watermark. You
Yep,
forgot the watermark.
forgot the watermark, and so I
Oh
posted it.
god. Oh
Yeah,
no.
so now it was on TFN, and remember at that time you could download. You had to download. So
Right.
you downloaded it. So now people had this. So once that got started getting shared, now it's off theforce.net, and everybody's saying, "Hey, this, here's the," and they're not paying attention to the movie. They're not actually paying attention to, what's on the screen. Everybody's like just super excited because it's a leaked episode 2, not realizing, hey, there's Braveheart. That should be a big clue.
Right.
But they used a video of Hayden Christensen and that nobody really knew. So that got screened at Comic Con, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, it's a leaked episode 2 video, and the massive Jedi attack and all that stuff." Which I'm sure the person who from Lucasfilm who said that didn't really know the film. She probably just knew that certain things might happen. And at the end of episode 2, there was a massive Jedi attack,
Right.
on the arena. So that that caused all sorts of confusion. And I know the anonymous director. I'm still friends with him today. He still does video editing for a lot of major stuff, major video um, productions. But yeah, so him and I had to sit down and talk and do like an interview and together and kind of clear the air about really what happened. And after when I
With
immediately when I got home,
who did you do an interview with to clear it up?
I did it with him, and I put it on the website and try to like
Oh, I
say
see, I
like,
see.
"Hey,
Got it,
this
got it.
this is a fake." He also got interviewed by a bunch of publications, because they would contact me, just like what you did when you contacted the Force.net to get in touch with me. Publications would contact TFN, and they would route it to me, and then I would route it to the directors to get say, "Hey, so and so wants to have an interview with you." So yeah, so we had to explain for the next few months, this is fake. This is he broke down shot by shot what he did, and how he did it.
Wow.
And so I learned never to forget the watermark again.
Yeah, I'm sure you never had any trouble remembering after that incident.
No, it was
Yeah.
funny. I mean, we were all laughing, but I think that was really the first indicator of how powerful fan films were becoming, even in Hollywood. That San Diego Comic-Con, which was really starting to ramp up. Hollywood was starting to take it over. Now it's taken it over completely with all the Marvel films. But at that point, it was still a lot about comic book geeks. But now we knew that major publications were talking about this, and that this one fan film director making a fake film actually had an impact on a major studio, Lucasfilm, at a major convention. So I think that was my first clue that we were doing something that actually was getting attention. Whether it was good attention or not, attention, I don't know, but it was attention, and people were really becoming aware of that. People are making stuff and posting it on the internet, and the internet's going to be a force of video releases in the future, which
No, that's
now we see.
no, absolutely. No, that's certainly true. There were a few films that you've released that were of a certain level of quality that were super impressive that I think got sort of mainstream attention. Like I remember Duality
Hmm.
when that one came out, the quality of it, like the effect, because there was a lot of CG, a lot of CG environments,
Hmm.
the effects, the performances, the choreography was all very well done and impressive. And I remember it got a lot of mainstream press coverage because it like really, that was one that for me at least really started to blur the line between fan productions and the quote unquote real thing. It was like, oh wow, it's like a fan filmmaker can really make something that looks pretty darn close to the real thing.
Yeah, and Dave is. I mean, Dave is probably the nicest guy I've ever met. Him and his wife, and my wife and I went to like see one of his movies that he's doing stunt work in, and he actually invited me up there, and I was actually going to be in it, in one of my Royal Guard. I was going to be. We never did it because it wouldn't work. I was going to be the Royal Guard. And there was going to be two of me on both sides of the door, when the
Mm,
when Lord Rive was supposed to, or no, yeah, Lord Rive shows up and he comes inside. They just never did. We just never did it. But I was there and I filmed it. He actually rented a small studio that had a, a, a I don't want to a quarter um, blue screen or green screen. I think it was a blue screen.
sure. Right.
So he had a quarter blue screen, and Dave is he's a black belt, and I don't remember which style he did, but he was a black belt, and he taught in Santa Barbara, and he's amazing stuntman. But all those flips and all that stuff, that was him and his one of his best students doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, when they brought that athletic ability, and then Dave and his partner Mark were learning, how to do special effects and 3D models and After Effects. They were big time into Apple, because obviously Apple was huge at that point.
Mm.
So he showed me some of the stuff he was working on. And I don't know if it was lightweight. I don't remember which 3D program he used, but he was showing me like, hey, I'm learning. He learned all this stuff by himself and self-taught. And I mean, the film itself, the release of it speaks for itself
No,
of his
absolutely.
talents. And again, what he did, he had an ability at an exceptional level, his athleticism, and he learned other things as a fan and made it an incredible short fan film.
Yeah, well, that's something really interesting. I think people make fan films for different reasons. And one of them, I feel like, I don't want to say this with any negative connotations because I think it's really smart, but I feel like, a lot of people would make a fan film as like a showcase for what they were capable of.
Hmm.
To use as either like a demo reel or like as a part of a
Hmm.
show reel to get professional work or like to help start their careers.
Hmm. Yeah, and absolutely, and several of those guys did. The Batman versus Predator, Duality, the Anonymous Director, even Joe Monroe and Night Quest, even though
Mm,
they were in the industry, now they had something, another demo reel says, hey, I can do this. You know,
right.
I think for several of them it was more than they were, doing on a day to day basis. Maybe they were just like, because it's all broken down. Each you know position is broken down to individual little parts, and you only get to do your little part.
Right.
But
Exactly.
now, they show that I took a film and made it from start to finish, and we did the lighting, we did the audio, editing, special effects, they could show that they're multifaceted and could do something and see it to completion. And you and I can both agree, they finished something,
Yeah, that's
where
hard. It's
it's
hard to
hard to
do.
do, and that's impressive. So, to have a 2 3 minute 5 minute demo reel for your next job, I mean, I can see why people did it, and I think it was a really smart way to promote yourself.
No, absolutely. So, why did you eventually decide to bow out and retire from TFN fan films?
So obviously, into episode 3 comes around, things had started to change. IGN was complaining to us at times, and I was kind of getting tired of them, listening to them complain about the bandwidth of TFN fan films. I mean, I understood why. I mean, it's business. Um, Also, remember, I think was it oh 04, oh 03, Atom Films came out with their Star
Oh, Atom
Wars
Films, right. They did
official fan
the
films awards or something like that.
the official fan film awards. Right, right,
But they had the restrictions that nothing copyright could be involved, because
right.
it had to be parodies, and you couldn't use you could use limited Star Wars music and effects and stuff, and and Lucasfilm approved certain things,
No,
and we
yeah, I
started.
remember, like, they had, like, a resources page or something with, like,
Mhm.
a small number of approved sound effects from the films that you could use and things like that. So, you could use some, but it was a very limited selection of what you could use.
Yeah, and one of the requirements is also that Adams Films had to host it. So we started losing some films, and a few of ours went over there. And at this point, I started realizing that we are now competing against the big guys, and we're not going to win. Um, and also, as these films get bigger and bigger, hosting is going to be a bigger problem. Bandwidth is always going to be a problem. The next time I bring up the next Sins of the Jedi I bring up is going to cause bandwidth problems, and I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Plus, I'd just been married uh, in a few years earlier, and I wanted to do more with my career, so I went back to school, to get my degree. So it just seemed like it was the right time to do it. Um, had a YouTube been around, really been a big thing then, I probably would have stayed for at least a few more years, because I wouldn't have those major issues. I wouldn't have to listen to IGN.
Sure.
I mean, I'm glad they hosted us. I mean, I can't thank them enough for that. But you know, tho- those concerns. That's not why I got into it. I wanted to do it just to make good fan films and be a place for people to make fan films. Now I was getting into all the administrative stuff of it, which I just really didn't like. And I had a lot of other things. When you're with a young wife, and you want to have kids and stuff like that, you have to have other priorities, and I took those priorities
No, for
and
sure.
walked away.
No, that makes sense. What sort of a life did TFN fan films have after you left?
It,
Um,
it's
uh,
it
Peter
fizzled.
out.
It started
Yeah.
petering out, and also because remember, Star Wars interest in Star Wars was major decline after Episode 3 because nobody
Well,
thought we
yeah, I
were
mean,
going to
that
have
was
it. They,
supposed to
they,
be it. I mean, that was
yeah,
supposed to be it. It sounds crazy, now when we have a brand new hour of Star Wars on our TV screens every week year round now,
hmm
but yeah, like that was supposed to be all there was at the time, and as far as we knew, like that was true.
yeah. So, but I mean, it still had an impact on the video effects industry because I'm trying to remember the guy's name is Andrew Kramer.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, Andrew Kramer.
Yeah, he built his own lightsaber plugin for his
Mhm.
website. And then he talked to the TFN fan films people and they corrected some of, and he did a part two. And you can actually, if you go to his website and he says, hey, I talked to TFN fan films and they corrected, they said you have to round, the saber at these points and, and stuff like that. So he made some corrections based on the
Oh,
experts
wow.
telling him.
That's
And
cool.
he's, he's done video effects for Star Trek, the new one, the JJ Abrams,
No, and I think
you know,
probably Star Wars as well at this point, because I know he worked on a lot of J.J. Abrams stuff. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if
yeah.
he did something.
So even the professionals are still we're talking to a bunch of fans on how
Yeah.
to do something correct.
Yeah. No, that's great. So during our email correspondence, when I was setting up this interview, you mentioned a bunch of anecdotes, most of which you covered, but there was one that I'm really curious to ask you about if you're comfortable talking about it. But you mentioned somebody sent you a death threat at one
Yeah,
point while you were
happened
running
twice.
TFN. It
Yeah,
happened
happened
twice.
happened twice.
Why? Forgive me, but why, in the name of all that is good, would somebody send you a death threat?
So remember again, we've talked, and TFN Fan Films at that time was the place. If you wanted your film to be seen, that's really where you had to be. I didn't intend for that to happen. That wasn't my intention, but that's what happened. And um, like I said earlier, I felt really bad rejecting people. The first one I think was a person because I used to get people arguing with me like, "Why did you take this? You took so and so's film, mine's better. I have better effects or stuff like that." And again, that goes back to me like if you repeated the same thing over and over again, I don't really want your film because we already have something like it.
Right.
But some folks don't like no for an answer. And I tried to keep it civil and I tried not to argue with anybody for too long. Eventually, I just have to cut it off. But I think the first time was because I told somebody no, and I don't remember who it was. I don't remember which film it was or anything like that. So I don't hold it against them. But it freaked out my wife, of course, because she's like, "You're doing this as a on a free basis as a fan, and people are sending you death threats." Um, did I take it seriously? Not really, but I was cognizant of what I was saying to people and how people would react.
Sure.
And so I talked to my crew and I'm like, hey, you guys, just be very careful. Don't say things to antagonize anybody. Don't escalate anything. The second time it happened was a few months later. That time I think if somebody was just screwing around. It could have been the same person that just wanted attention again, but I just pretty much blew that one off. But the fact that somebody sent it to somebody who was just trying to run a website has stuck with me. And
Yeah, I can only imagine. Like, that's just so wild. Like, how unhinged do you have to be to threaten somebody's life over a fan film? Like, I mean,
some of these people put a lot of money into these. I mean,
well,
and
that's true. That's a good point.
even
That's true.
$1,000 for some of these folks were, which is nothing for a film, to rent lights, rent, a video camera and, try to, even just build at that time like a G4 Mac, because you had to have SCSI drives because that was the only thing fast enough to process video. That could be $2,000, $3,000 as is. And then, yeah, you get rejected by the hoster.
The place,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I can understand the frustration. And I said, I felt really bad about doing it, but there were things in the background that a lot of people didn't know about that we had to be aware of.
for sure. Well, I'm sorry that you had to experience that. It doesn't seem like either one of them was a very serious threat, but it's just sort of mind-boggling that
Yeah.
somebody would take it there. But this is kind of a broader question, and you've probably heard this at some point. I think some people often wonder why make a Star Wars fan film? Like, why not spend all that effort and money making something original? I'm just wondering if you have ever heard that or like what your response would be to that sort of a question.
We heard quite a bit, and when I'd do interviews with either local media or sometimes with newspapers and stuff, and that question actually would come up quite a bit. Like, why do people do this? of course, like you and I are sitting here, we love Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars shaped whether you are a filmmaker, whether you were a cowboy at the time, you like to, dress up in costumes. Star Wars affected, as children of the 80s, 70s and 80s, Star Wars affected us in major ways, and it drove us in a lot of, in our lives, much like Star Trek did for our, either our parents or older siblings. So the chance to play in the world and not get busted for doing it. I mean, that was probably one of the big reasons, because a lot of these guys probably would have done Star Trek fan films if they could have, but Paramount wouldn't let them do it. Um, so it was a chance to play in somebody's sandbox that you weren't supposed to be there, but they're not going to call the cops on you. And so you got to do some things. I think I can do a better lightsaber fight than episode 4, 5, and 6 and 1. Or we can do stuff with stormtroopers. Make things from the point of view of the stormtroopers. So like imps, like there was that fan film Imps, and also of course Troops. So it's just you do things. You could do things from a different point of view. Episode 2 and episode 3 weren't out yet for a lot of this time, so we didn't actually get to see what the Jedi Council and what the Jedi life really was. So we could, people were doing stuff like that, or just take it completely different. And Star Wars in the real world, like PA Wars, a PA versus his evil Sith director. You get to explore a world with your imagination. You're not limited by what just George Lucas thought. But even look at today. I mean, we can ask the same question of Hollywood. Why do you keep traipsing over the same things over and over again instead of making something new? Because it's easy, it's familiar, and it's, a lot of times people just want to see themselves in that universe.
For sure, and also, something that also applies to fan fiction, like to just
Hmm.
written stories. It's also it's absolutely everything you said, but there's also something as well. Like if you want to be a filmmaker or do something under the umbrella of the larger filmmaking process, or
Hmm.
if you want to be a writer, like one of the hardest things to do is to come up with that great idea, right? Staring at the blank white page is one of the hardest lifts to get over. And something that either fan films or fan fiction allows you to do is that it allows you to practice your craft, sort of removing that starting obstacle. Right.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like, this world, these characters, what it's supposed to look like, or
Hmm.
like how you want to tweak it, and it's an opportunity to practice figuring out how to make a film or how to write a story, how to write good dialogue or good characters, or like how to choose your camera angles or how to do special effects. It's just the existence of that sandbox allows you to flex your muscles and to experiment in a way that I think is less intimidating than having to come up with something whole cloth from nothing. And, something that we've talked about in some of the other episodes that we've done, George Lucas, he intentionally set out to create a modern mythology, or like a modern mythological framework, and something that, you know, mythology serves a function in a culture and society, and it's
Hmm.
sort of, we have these archetypes and these ideas in the back of our minds all the time, and we express ourselves through retelling and reinterpreting those ideas. So it makes sense to me that when wanting to express themselves, people would reach for those mythic images and mythic ideas. And
Hmm.
the existence of fan films and this desire for people to make their own fan films and to use the themes and language and characters and settings of Star Wars to tell their own stories and express themselves creatively, I think is a testament to how successful that actually was.
And Star Trek and Star Wars, Doctor Who. One of the I think that the attractions to those genres and those fandoms, and especially when we get into fan films, is it's when you're writing it, it's safe. It's
Right.
if you were and that was one of that. You go back to like what was I looking for? One of the requirements I had is you cannot do anything that Star Wars wouldn't do. Hell was probably the only thing you're going to say, because they said it in Empire Strikes Back.
And Empire
That's
Strikes
as
Back. Right. Exactly.
that's as far
Right.
as you're going to get. But Star Trek, they did. Modern Star Trek obviously is a little bit different. But Doctor Who, same kind of thing. So when you're writing, you're right. You can write and stay true to the universe and write for everybody. and or you can act for everybody, and so it's a very wide audience. So you're not narrowing yourself to, hey, if I'm going to do a John Wick type of fan film, you have a very narrow, and you're going to be doing very certain things. And, you're probably never going to get on YouTube because, they're going to strike you for the,
Right.
for violence, that kind of stuff. So with Star Wars, everything was safe, being shot with the blaster, being cut with a lightsaber, generally, except, really for two incidents, Jango Fett and the bar scene in episode 4. The
Right.
lightsaber is a clean cut, and it's, there's not much to it. So you could do stuff like that, and you don't need squibs, and you don't have to do anything for the blood and gore, and you don't have to deal with language. So I think that kind of attracts it to a lot more people that maybe not normally would do films or writing for this kind of stuff, but they can feel included on this, and they can do it and they can say, I can make a film that I can show my parents, or I could show my kids, in 20 years, that kind of thing. And I think that was really attractive for some.
How have fan films changed in the last 20 or so years, do you think?
That's a good question. I think they have been diminished quite a bit because of Disney Plus, honestly. Like you said, there's a TV show now. You can get Star Wars every week. You don't have to wait for the next fan film to come out. I think that's had a diminishing effect on expectations of what a fan film could be. Can the
Mm,
next person make a next great film that's, I really anticipate it. I'm going to get to see Darth Vader again, or oh hey, we're going to see Boba Fett do something other than stand around and get killed in Return of the Jedi, that kind of stuff. I think the fans effect it's been greatly decreased. We do appreciate what the Lucasfilm folks have done, and they have taken things, I think, in really good new steps. I think they've had some great hits, some great falls, but it's just the same thing with fan films. Some of them were fantastic, some of them were not. They just paid a lot more for it. Um,
right.
so I would like to say, I'd like to hope that some of that influence of the fandom doing these new stories would have influenced some of these folks who are doing Disney Plus stories. Because like even Kevin Rubio, he did Tag and Bink. It was a comic. They were actually supposed to show up in the Han Solo movie. They got cut, unfortunately. He's a professional, obviously, but here's a guy who did a Star Wars fan film. Now, his characters could have been in a major motion picture. David Cumber obviously said he's gone to do major stunt work. So I mean, I haven't seen anything that says that's a move he did in Duality. I haven't seen anything like that, but I would like to see that, hey, these fan films had an influence on the not massive films, but on the smaller Disney Plus type films or TV shows.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look at all the Disney Plus shows in different ways, and like in their approach, it seems, is to give each one like its own sort of identity, like distinct
Hmm.
identity, and explore a different part of the Star Wars universe or do something different stylistically.
Hmm.
And it's that kind of experimentation with like different perspectives and different styles that really you first saw with fan films in many ways. I mean, that's what it reminds me of. Like I don't remember if it was The Mandalorian or the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but I remember reading some tweet and they were like, it just looks like a big budget fan film or something. And I was like, they meant that in a derisive way, but I read that and I was like, well, like what constitutes a fan film? It's I mean, like I would be proud of that in a
Yeah,
certain way. Fan
John and
films to
Dave are
me,
fans. John and Dave are both fans. I mean,
yes, right,
they're
yes,
now they're
absolutely,
paid. I mean, they're
yeah,
majorly they're paid, and they're also big time directors, but they're fans, and so they're making they're putting their visions to, and obviously the different directors and stuff like that. So I mean, in ways, they are fan films with the blessings of Lucasfilm. So
right.
yeah, and like you said, like Mandalorian, in the last episodes, you had this with Jason Sudeikis and that other guy from SNL. You're seeing the point of view from scout troopers.
That scene was like straight out of Troops. Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, that could have easily been in Troops, and those guys just screwing around, shooting the cans. They can't hit anything, which we did kind of see even in Troops when they're trying to shoot that Jawa
right,
that's fleeing.
right.
That I think that has had an influence. So that's why I think the Disney Plus thing has, where it's been growing. The amateur films, I think, are their influence is going to be less and less. And people are going to be less likely to do it. Now they may move to other fandoms. I can definitely see that. But I think in the Star Wars circle, there's just kind of less incentive to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I was just trying to do a little bit of research before recording this, just to refamiliarize myself with some names and some stuff. And I came upon an interview with some fan filmmaker on a website, and he was asked the question, like, "Why do you think there are so many Star Wars fan films?" And his answer was, "Well, it's because there's not a lot of new Star Wars, right? And people want to
Hmm.
see it." And so there's that thirst, that demand, and like we're sort of filling that desire for more Star Wars. And, we don't seem to have that issue anymore.
Yeah, and we're seeing that now, especially with with so many shows covering different time periods. Because from 2000 to 2005, by far most of our stories were set either pre Star Wars, like during the Purge, which we really haven't gotten to until recently, or it was like after Star Wars, or so it was covering time periods that had never been covered in three movies, or actually four, because of Episode One. So it was time periods that just were never covered. Now you're seeing Disney Plus take that role, and they're covering other time periods. So now, now they're even going to go back to where they're going to do Knights of the Old Republic.
Mm,
That could have been a great fan film, but it's probably going to be even a better movie, because that was that's fantastic writing, and it was a great game. So that's where I think it's going to get really hard if somebody wants to say, hey, I'm going to do a fan film today. I think it's going to be a lot harder to do.
One of the last things I was going to ask you is, like I mentioned, I went to the Force.net fan film section, and I wanted to watch some of these old fan films that I remembered. And again, like I said, a lot of the links are broken. I was wondering, do you think someone would ever sort of make like a YouTube channel, like Fan Film Archive or something, like a fan film theater again, and kind of like recollect all of these old fan films just to make them viewable someplace? Is that something even possible to do? But it sounds
No,
like
it would never
no,
happen. YouTube would strike you,
that's
because
true.
you're gonna get music copyrighted. Even if Lucasfilm doesn't care, you're gonna get music copyrighted, and you're gonna get strike,
Right.
and you're gonna be shut down. That's that's why where when we did fan films, we were at the perfect time. Granted, it was in the infancy of computer graphics, special effects at home, but we were at the perfect time. Nowadays, you would never get away with it, because again, you're still gonna have to host it somewhere, but
Right.
where? And everybody's using YouTube, or one of those guys, and they're gonna strike you. Um, so it's I think it would be more hassle now than it was back then. Even with dealing with IGN, it was still it was still the Wild West on the internet at that point, which where nowadays it's heavily regulated, especially in the media
For sure.
sphere. Which, and I just don't think YouTube would ever allow it. Think about Adam's films. You couldn't use Lucasfilm music, so you had to use other types of music. Duality had to actually take its music off to be on that. So I think it's a you're gonna have an IP nightmare. Honestly, I just don't think it's worth it. I think fan films in its the way we did it is long gone. I just
Yeah.
don't think it'll ever happen again. Um,
No, I
I'm
think you're right.
I'm very
I think
happy to
you're right.
be. I'm glad to be a part of it and having a major role in it. I had a great time doing it. I think a lot of people had fun doing it, but I just don't see us ever getting there again.
Well, Jeff, unless there's something that you want to leave the audience with, I really had a wonderful time learning a lot from you and also reminiscing about what was a very special moment for fandom and for young filmmakers and Star Wars fans.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't make fan films that happen. I had a role in it, and I played the curator, as you said. I ran the website, but without the fan filmmakers, and also without the fans themselves, I was just one guy. But it was these people who spent a lot of money on their films, a lot of time, and a lot of the fans who supported them and were, like you said, eagerly awaiting a lot of these fan films. Without them, this never would have worked. So to me, the fan film community from that time period was the perfect fandom, and I miss it. But that at that time period, I can think about it and actually make me smile, even with all the work that it was. That was true love for Star Wars, and I can't thank those people that spent so much time on the site enough for what they did, and the success they gave us.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for being willing to talk to me and for being so generous with your time. I really had a lot of fun having this conversation with you. So thank you very, very much.
No, I appreciate it. It's obviously, as I told you, it's been a long time since I've actually talked about this, and a lot of people don't know a lot of the stuff that happened in the background. So it's nice to finally be able to share some of the funny things that happened over the years, and the good and the bad that happened. But you brought about a lot of the memories as well, and so now, like you said, I'm gonna probably have to go see if what films I have and crack a few open and see and watch them again.
I wish I could join you, but so thanks again, Jeff. And for anyone listening, if you liked what you heard, please visit trashcompod.com, where we have transcripts of this episode and all our other episodes. And we are Trashcompod across all social media. And we will see you on the next one.